Alrighty folks, well I just want to thank everybody for coming along and the journalists, and I especially want to thank Wendy for hosting us here on what Mark Cameron tells me is a beautiful farm, although a little dry for the time of year. I could be wrong about that, but I'm not wrong about a simple fact around our climate. There's an old saying that everybody wants to go to heaven, just nobody wants to die. And for a long time, New Zealanders have been able to go to heaven by saying we're clean and green, but not have to die by having the lights go out. Our hydro dams and more recently our geothermal assets have protected us from the hard choices that many people around the world face. Either use thermal energy in order to generate electricity or have the lights go out. Either use farming, cows, chickens, rice paddies to feed the world, or allow people to starve. They've faced hard choices around the world, and we've been protected by our hydro resources and our incredibly efficient farmers. But unfortunately, the time when New Zealanders can think they're going to heaven and never had to die around climate policy is winding up. And we see the pressure both in the town and in the country. Rural people, those on the front line of the economy, they feel it, and they feel it hard and now. They see it in communities where the trees replace the sheep and the beef, and they ask themselves, how is it possible to eat wood? And how is it possible to have a school bell ringing when there's no children to show up in our community? That is the reality that people in the front line of the economy in rural New Zealand feel already. But people in urban New Zealand, they are also feeling it, even if the cause has not become completely visible to them just yet. They see it when their power price spikes, $600 a month getting through the winter, nagging the kids to turn everything off and wondering how they're going to make the bill. In one case I heard recently, borrowing from relatives to get through the winter with the power bill paid and wondering which thing they're going to give up in order to get through it. Now that is reality for many people in New Zealand, and the culprit is that when we turn on the baseload or the peaking generation at Huntly, half of that cost of the electricity that sets the price for the whole country is emissions trading scheme fees. You see, the thing is, James Shaw wanted us all to go to heaven, but he wasn't prepared to die. And the truth is that much of New Zealand's economy, our prosperity, and people's hopes in their households are dying because we have set inflexible and overly ambitious goals when it comes to climate policy. We have said by going over to Paris and signing up to an agreement that we're going to be at net zero by 2050. Regardless of what the rest of the world does, we have signed up to a Zero Carbon Act that says we'll be at net zero by 2050, even if the rest of the world doesn't make that goal. That's not realistic, folks. What that means is that New Zealand farming will be moved to places in the world where they emit more. Bad for the planet and bad for the people in our own country. What that means is that sawmills and factories, dairy factories included, will be moving to process food for consumers in other parts of the world. They're less efficient than us. Bad for the planet and bad for New Zealand industry and the future of New Zealand children. That's what every party except ACT signed up to. If there's one thing I'm proud of, is that I may have taken a lot of crap, but I wasn't wrong when I was the only person to vote against the Zero Carbon Act. Now every party is scrambling to say maybe, like Russell Cootes, we could just trim the sails and pick the next wind shift. The truth is that the ACT Party has sailed the true course for as long as I've been in Parliament. which people are reminding me is turning into quite a while. Now, I believe it's critical that political parties put their cards on the table before the next election and say what our position will be as we go into 2026. And for the ACT Party, it's very, very simple. Like a bad boyfriend, either the Paris Agreement has to change or we have to leave. We can't put up with any more of this abuse on our farms, our families, and our futures. We must renegotiate by joining with like-minded countries around the world who are also exposed to an enormous amount of methane. Now, I want to introduce a few of my very close friends and colleagues. Mark Cameron is the authentic voice of rural New Zealand. Andrew Hoggard, a former Federated Farmers President, is our Minister for Biosecurity, for Food Safety, and also Agriculture and the Environment. Now, the thing about these two characters is that, unlike me, they are the real rural New Zealand. In fact, there's an authenticity about these two that blows every other so-called rural spokesperson in Parliament out of the water. And it's actually true. It's not uncommon in the ACT caucus to have to say, you guys shut up, we're trying to have a conversation here. And they're going on about fence posts or strainers or mastitis or something. And we actually have to tell them to simmer down so we can get through our caucus meetings. They're real. The other person is a sea kayaker and environmentalist, Simon Court. Now, Simon is somebody who has spent his whole life trying to clean up environmental problems. He's worked in waste management. He's now working on the replacement of the Resource Management Act. But what Simon understands implicitly is that the solution to our environmental problems is not to beat on people who are trying to make a difference, but to use better science and better laws to solve the problems we face, both personally and environmentally, so that we can have a better tomorrow. In other words, so we can go to heaven without having to die. The only way you do that is through common sense, science, and a bit of skepticism about some of the claims being made. Now, I want to invite Andrew to talk a little bit about what we're announcing today in relation to food. The simple fact, there shouldn't be a tax on food. No one else is accepting it, and that is what New Zealand farmers are expected to accept. The only beneficiaries of that won't be the climate, it'll be foreign farmers who are less efficient. So I'll get Andrew to talk about that with some of his expertise, and I'll get Simon to talk a little bit about the emissions reductions plan and what we might look to work towards in the next election, because it's time the rest of the world sees New Zealand is waking up. Without anything more from me, Andrew.
Thank you, David. Kind of already stolen most of what I was going to say anyway. So I guess
You'll say it better, mate. I
Yeah,
promise.
okay. I guess the main thing is, as David mentioned, a tax on farming or a tax on methane is just a tax on farming. It is a tax on food. Everyone's talking about cost of living crisis at the moment. So why would we do anything to make food production more expensive? So it makes 0 sense. Our farmers are most efficient in the world. The intensity of the emissions per kg of product has been decreasing for a long time. We don't need some tax to drive us to do better. We're always doing better and better every year. I think the other key thing is, historically, New Zealand's just seemed to go along with the rest of the world rather than stand up for agriculture. There's a bit in the Paris Accord that talks about the importance of food security. We should be reducing emissions whilst maintaining food security. That means being more efficient. Now, New Zealand is the leading light of that, and yet that just seems to be a sort of tokenism thrown in there. There is nothing really in the actions that I see and others see that's actually encouraging that food security, that's encouraging those that are most efficient to keep producing more so that we don't send it to less efficient countries. And I think that's part of what we're saying is we need to make it better and recognise where that food production can occur really efficiently, places like New Zealand, and the scheme actually needs to drive that, and that's what we should be taking as a country, a leadership position in pushing forward and truly getting a better understanding globally of the difference between methane and CO2, which just doesn't exist at the moment.
Well done, Andrew. And Simon, a bit about the ERP and
Thank you,
associated
David.
developments.
So the emissions reduction plans are a 5-year plan that was in the Zero Carbon Act. What Labor did when they sent James Shaw to Glasgow to announce a stupid target of a 50% reduction in emissions by 2030, it forced New Zealand to back that with domestic emissions reductions. That's forcing incredible cost into the economy as the carbon price gets artificially inflated to meet this target. It's flowing into the cost of electricity, it's affecting households' ability to keep the lights on, and also in the regions, businesses that depend on affordable energy are closing and people are losing their jobs. That's why ACT is committing to review the emissions reduction plans that back our Paris climate commitments so that they are affordable and that they're actually tied to what New Zealand needs. We need affordable energy, we need to be able to make sure that businesses can continue to grow and thrive and households are not forced to choose between putting food on the table or having the lights and the heater on.
Well, thank you very much, Simon, and quite happy to take questions. Any media representatives or real people, very happy to hear what you say. I can make that joke about politicians too. We're just, yeah.
Where are we going with this gas issue?
Well, the simple issue is that the wells aren't producing, and there's two things you can do about that. You either find alternatives, or you get the confidence back in the gas industry so that some of those wells where there actually is some potential can be explored. The truth is we have to do both. The biggest danger to gas production in New Zealand is actually reckless politicians. And so we actually try to win every election. However, we have a checkered history on that, and we've tried our best to take away the ban. We are putting up cash to say the Crown will co-invest so that a future government will actually lose financially if they welsh on the deal. And then there's also the issue of winning the next election. Those are the things that we can do to help with the exploration. I think, meanwhile, one of the reasons that we need to ask ourselves about climate policy is, are we prepared to sustain an effective ban on mining coal? You know, at the moment, Huntly was built on a coal mine, but you've got to bring it in from Indonesia. Because if you don't have a substitute for gas, then all of the gas, I can guarantee you, will end up in electricity generation. And if you've got your chicken coop set up to use gas to keep your chicks warm, then you're going to be competing with Genesis. And given that they have basically all of New Zealand desperate to keep the lights on, they will force you to pay a high price. So look, part of it is political certainty. We're doing everything we can, remove the ban, co-invest, win the next election. That's what we could do there. But we also are asking, well, what are some of the alternatives for the electricity production that will free up what gas there is for industrial uses? Well, I know. Yeah.
David,
Richard.
On the fact sheet that you put out this morning, you talk about withdrawing from Paris being the ultimate sanction, if you like. Is that a bottom line for you, that you would go into the coalition negotiations next time round saying that if you can't get these numbers reduced, you would advocate withdrawing from Paris?
Well, what I've found is that ACT can be very effective without saying it's a bottom line. If you look at what we've managed to achieve as a party that is 1/6 of the government, I think you can see that we got a pretty good form, and we've got good form on this issue. That, you know, I voted 1 against 119 against the Zero Carbon Act because I said it was bad then. I know it's bad now. If you want to talk about bottom lines and stuff, we'd have that political chat. But I think what's happening today is that we're saying, look, this issue is back on the table. Paris is back on the table. The world should take note that we are not going to sit idly by and watch New Zealand destroyed for a fantasy that actually no one else believes.
And Andrew, would the recommendations from Nicola Shadbolt's panel at the end of last year, the 14 to 15% reduction in methane post 2017, is that what you're after?
Look, I mean, our position's always been that we should be doing what our trading partners are doing, and at the moment what her panel showed was that currently what the rest of the world is doing shows that our reduction should be around 14% by 2050 to have no additional impact on warming. So that's the clear, simple answer out of that report. It showed that suddenly if everyone magically got on board with 1.5 degrees, it would need to be 24. That doesn't seem to be happening. So the logical answer is, our position has been, what is the rest of the world doing? We'll do that. We're not going to be a sacrificial guinea pig for the rest of the world. So, pretty simply.
So you go along with the recommendations from her report?
Well, yeah, 14% was what the rest of the world's doing. It's something that needs to be, reviewed regularly in terms of what's the rest of the world doing. We want to say, hey, yeah, we're doing our bit, but we don't need to destroy our country to be some sort of virtue signaller out front.
If you look at how far this has actually moved already, I mean, the other guys in Labour and the Greens and actually at the time New Zealand First, they were calling 24 to 47. That's what they all signed up to. And what that means is if we do another stand-up here, there might be a few less farmers. And that's a real tragedy for New Zealand. I bet Nicola Willis wouldn't want to hear that, because at the moment it's the farmers that are keeping the shop open.
100%.
And I believe that having got to the point where we might well see it down around 14, that's huge progress. But we've got to keep going to the point where New Zealanders, the most efficient farmers in the world, aren't being sacrificed for the profit of overseas farmers who just aren't as good as the ones here.
If you don't have a price on methane, how do you get farmers to go to 14?
Well, can I just
Basically,
we're already on track to have hit 10% by 2030. So that's only another 4% in 20 years. I mean, basically, with all the technology that's about, that will come about, the continual improvement New Zealand farmers do anyway, that's easily achievable. We don't need a price on it to achieve that. Just keep getting better like we've always done. Will get us there.
Yeah. I don't think New Zealand farmers generally don't need encouragement to be efficient. They're pretty good at it already.
Do you want to elaborate on the comment about the impact of meeting these climate goals on electricity prices? Because that's really the type of thing that gets through to people. They have to pay for this stuff.
Yeah, well, you're absolutely right. Look, I mean, people on the front line of the economy see it. If your sawmill's been shut down or your farm's been covered in pine trees, you see it. But I just make the point, what frontline workers are feeling, is about to become visible to people in cities who may be a few layers back in terms of their job. They're seeing it in the prices. And the way it works is pretty simple. The price of electricity is set by whatever the marginal producer or the most expensive electricity producer is in any given half-hour period. Now, if that marginal producer is Huntly, well, half the price you're paying is actually the ETS fees. It's that simple. So if you want to constrain the number of credits, keep the price high, well, that's great if you are growing trees for carbon, which I separate from people who are growing trees for wood. But if you're growing trees for carbon, fantastic. But it also means that everybody who's struggling with their power bill this winter is effectively transferring their cash into forestry. And I have nothing against forestry. I think this country's, got a lot to say, owes forestry a lot. Wood is one of our top 5 exports, no question. However, if you're doing it purely for carbon credits, make no mistake, that is being funded through a place called Huntly by everybody paying a power bill and shivering this winter. Yeah.
David, there's another question too, which is Plan Change 1 in the Waikato Regional Council.
I'll repeat the question back if you like.
Well, the question is are you able, or can you give us an update on what you guys are looking at doing with Plan Change 1 with Waikato Regional Council, where in the Motor Karaka, for example, where the resource consents are being questioned on the looking to pull out the stop banks and the screw pump down there and flood 4,600 acres of the most pristine dairy country land in the world. and return it back to wetland. That's the proposal that's been put forward. So under Plan Change 1, most of the farmers will be out of business. Commercial growers in the Pukekohe area and south will be out of business. So
Yep. Well, all I'd say is you should always judge a general by the quality of their lieutenants. Here you go, Simon.
Oh, so a couple of weeks ago, the government passed what we hope and intend to be the last amendment to the Resource Management Act. And in that legislation that's just gone through, we've suspended plan changes across the country. We've said time out until we get the new resource management system passed through all stages next year and then transitioned. And what that means is for councils like Environment Waikato and others around the country who are taking their plan changes through and then, say, forcing farmers to get consents for things that are normal farming activity, the message is stop and stop now. So what I expect is that you won't see this continue.
thank you very much.
Good answer. Anything you'd add to that, Andrew?
No, I just think, you know, we've got to get, really looking forward to the replacement that Simon's bringing in, because I think it will enable a lot of common sense going forward in terms of not only farming but environmental management as well. At the moment, I'm hearing from farmers up and down the country that are just stuck in an absolute limbo land with councils not granting consents. They can't plan for the future. It's holding back investment, and I think, can't come soon enough, these changes.
Yep. No, with the possible exception of bringing back pseudoephedrine, I believe that the RMA is the most important thing this government will do, by far. Right. If we've answered all your questions, then we'll step out of the hot seat and just thank Wendy again. Where's she gone? Hi, Wendy. Thank you very much for hosting us. We're extremely grateful, and we hope that you have a great season.